Hello, everyone. I hope you have a good day. So, we will now proceed with the discussion on developing the instrument as a review. Now, before we proceed with how to write the research in terms of setting it into objectives or research questions. So, let's have a review first. We say that when we develop instrument, it's basically talking about an instrument which is a tool used to collect, measure, and analyze data related to your subject, which means this is the most important part in terms of gathering the data. No? So this is the tool that we are using in order to have a very compatible data that we will use for our subject or our research. So tools can be in a form of test, surveys, scales, questionnaires, or checklists. No? And it should be validated by experts, including testing its reliability by making pilot tests. Okay. So the question is, how do we develop instruments? So that's one thing that we have addressed last time. No. So break down the research question by answering the research question. No. So you answer the question or your research questions, and by answering that, you will be guided on how to develop the instrument. No? So that's the map or the roadmap that you're going to take when you develop your instrument by asking the questions. So, for example, if you wanna ask, if you're asking in a research question like, uh, how do students or how did students uh, cope in terms of their mental health during pandemic, no? So you will be with that kind of research question, you will be thinking of the different coping mechanisms that the students uh, have used in terms of coping with their mental health during pandemic. So you will now be doing a lot of categorization and questions under those categories in terms of the different coping mechanism. So you see, when you ask a research question, it brings you a lot of things, no? By asking questions, you tend to classify categories, you tend to make categories, and develop statements under those categories to become your instruments or instrument. Now, for example, let's talk about an example like difficulties of parents with low educational attainment in assisting the children in modular distance learning during pandemic. So, we were able to categorize difficulties because that's the research question. What are the difficulties? Okay, in this research, that's the question uh, pertaining to the difficulties of parents with low educational attainment. So they have four categories under difficulties. They have intellectual difficulties. Since parents are going to simulate their teaching roles, so they have difficulties in terms of simulating these teaching roles. And there's also gender roles when you talk about gender roles in terms of doing their things at home and their responsibilities as mothers. No? So there are difficulties in doing these roles because now it's being added by the role to become teachers, no, to their children at home. Then we also have economic difficulties. When you talk about economic difficulties, if you're a parent who assists or who has roles already that is similar or that are similar to those of the teachers, then you will have to distribute your time in terms of economic activities. No, so instead of doing your livelihood, you sometimes cut the time delegated or time for your economic activities by allocating also time for your assisting the children that you have, no, in terms of their modular distance learning. Another example is learners' interests, attitudes, and compliance to modular distance learning during pandemic. So you have three categories automatically because it's already spelled out, no, in the title. So you have interest, attitudes, and compliance, and all you need to do is just do some statements under these three categories. So how do we develop instrument? No, The answer is by breaking down each categories into statements. So we provide 3 to 5 statements in each category. And there should only be one thought in each statement. And statements in each category should be consistently positive or consistently negative. So we usually use the pronouns I, we, or you to espouse ownership to each statement as the respondents respond to the survey. For example, if you're the respondent, if you will be using I or we, you will be thinking that you are really the respondents that they are really looking for, no? In order to answer some queries about the research. Okay. Here are some examples of the first research title on difficulties of parents with low educational attainment. We have 4 categories there. Then we also have examples of statements under interest, attitudes, and compliance on the research about learners' interest, attitudes, and compliance to modular distance learning during pandemic. So all you need to do if you get lost is try to look into these examples. So these examples are really, really clear because take a look into the interest. It talks about interest, no, the positive interest. Then there's also a negative interest. It is done with positive and negative because we need to collate all statements with regards to negative connotation about interest, no, in terms of the modular distance learning during pandemic. And we also have to collate the negative ones as well. Okay, so we're supposed to have a workshop. I think you've done already this one and submitted in our LMS. So all I need to do is to review them again. I mean, I've reviewed them, but I have to do it again in order to see some possible polishing and some suggestions. No, I appreciate because I think most of you are really, really well equipped already in terms of constructing your statements under each category. Now let's talk about setting research objectives and questions. I think this is something that is going to be very, very easy already because you have already designed or developed your instrument. So how do we deal with setting research objectives and questions? No? So just an information, when you talk about setting research objectives and questions, these are also broken down research objectives and questions under the main research question. Remember when we asked, when we gave you an example like, what are the coping, how do students cope, or what are the coping mechanism of students in terms of their mental health during pandemic. So you can set research objectives and formulate research questions under that one mother research question based on the identified research problem. Okay, what's the good news? The categories for your survey now become your structure for statement of the problem. I'll give you an example in a while. It is also, second, the structure of your introduction and literature. So your objectives now, or what I mean is uh, the instrument that you have is also the structure of your introduction and literature, no? So it also is the flow of your methods and treatments or statistical treatments, sampling and population, uh, and even to the extent of doing some other parts of the methods, no? So the instrument uh, becomes your guide, and much more if you were able to make to set, no, research questions and research objectives. They become now your guide in terms of doing your introduction and literature. Okay, let's have an example of setting objectives, research objectives, and research questions or statements of the problems, no? So the title of the in this example is difficulties of parents with low educational attainment in assisting their children in modular distance learning during pandemic. So what is the profile of the respondents in terms of? We thought that we need to have this demographic traits, no, or profile because they are appropriate for the research topic or theme. No, it's about age, number of children, family and monthly income. So usually, most of the time, or this is a common question in the statements of the problem, no? Because we wanted to know different profiles and how they respond to the main question of the research, no? So, which is number two, no? So, from the title, you can see that number two is like coming from the title of the research itself, no? It states, what are the difficulties encountered among parents with low educational attainment in assisting their children in modular learning in terms of. So you see there are four components under question number two, and these components are found from your developing or development of your research instrument, no? So that's why your research instrument, since it come from the research question, the main research question from the identified problems, it now becomes the statement of the problem, like in this case, question number two, no? So you ask, what are the difficulties encountered among parents with low educational attainment, no? So it becomes, the instrument becomes usually the question number two. Now, number three is also very common among yes, among quantitative design research. So it states, is there a significant difference in the difficulties of parents with low educational attainment in assisting their children in modular distance learning when the respondents are grouped based on their profile? No, so these are common. So if you have the question number one, which talks about the demographic traits, question number three should be there also, because this question is asking uh, on the difficulties encountered among parents, but they are broken down into groups. Like, for example, in age, it wants to find out if the respondents with age, like, for example, if the age is 21 to 36 in group A and 37 and older in group B. So the research is asking what is the response of those under 21 to 36 years old, and what is the response of those within ages 37 and or older, no? Do they have similar opinion or response, or they have significant differences in terms of the response to the research question? Okay, in the trends now, there are developments on the type of question like it is stated in question number four. So what is stated in question number four? What program or programs can be developed to address the difficulties of parents with low educational attainment in assisting their children in modular distance learning? Because even if this is a quantitative, descriptive, or descriptive quantitative design of research, it is expected that we will be doing something practical right after the research. Maybe developing a manual, maybe making a training program, or making uh, maybe a digital device, for example, or a book, for example. So nowadays, even if it's a quantitative research, you are expected to make recommendations beyond that. So based from the data, what programs or recommendations can you be formulate as a form of improvement or actions, no? So that's it. So another example, this is on the learner's interest, attitudes, and compliance to modular distance learning during pandemic. So just the same, no? In this case, question number one on demographic profile has age, gender, and grade level. Of course, the researcher will be the ones who will be deciding as to what particular demographic data that they will be using, no? So there, you have specific questions 2, 3, 4 with regards on interest, attitudes, and compliance. Then you have number 5 as well. Okay. Then number 6 could be about developing a program after finding the results or having extracted or collected data or information from the research questions. Okay. So for our activity, for your assignment, you will be submitting in our Canvas LMS or in our learning management system your research objectives and research question, and you will be presenting it, and you will be uh, submitting it in the tab that I will be labeling as setting your research objectives or research question. No? So submit it through a reply, and don't forget to comments on the research objectives and research questions or statements of the problems of your other group mates. No, it would be nice to have a very interactive uh, comments from each of the classmates or each member of the class. No, okay, so that's it. So I'll be setting the schedule or the deadline on the LMS that we are using right now. So thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, I will be dedicating a space for you to ask questions. You may look into our examples like this one, okay, or this one. If you have questions, all you need to do is you can chat me and raise it in the LMS. No? So we want our outputs to be placed in the LMS so that it becomes a repository and it will never be gone. No? So we can easily go back and trace our work there. So thank you very much.